Every species can smell its own extinction. The last ones left won't have a pretty time with it. In 10 years, maybe less, the human race will be a bedtime story for their children. A myth. Nothing more. Do you want to know what the problem with places like this is? With religion in general? It's never known how to convey the anatomy of horror. Religion seeks to discipline through fear, yet doesn't understand the true nature of creation. No one's ever believed it enough to make it real. The same cannot be said of my work. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fluffenhammer. Roll the titles!
Every man lives, not every man truly dies.
Guns might be that way. Let's go the other way.
Hello, ladies and gents, and he's done it again every single time. I don't know how he does it. And you know, these, as we said last time, these things are totally impromptu. He just comes up with them. They just come out of nowhere. And it's always, I don't know whether it's a generational thing, Adam, but it's always something that I have some connection to. It's really quite strange, like the overlaps, the overlaps of influence that we just randomly discover. In fact, I'm going to go back through the Fluffenhammer and see if there's one that I don't get.
Yeah, there's bound to be at this point. I mean, this is episode 25, so...
Oh, I don't know. I've got the feeling that every single one of them is an influence we have in common. It's kind of distressing, in a way. It's kind of distressing.
But George, did I ever tell you my favourite colour was blue?
Oh, wow. Lovecraft. Already we're going Lovecraftian. Not quite Lovecraft, but certainly Lovecraftian. And a bit of John Carpenter thrown in.
You should never go full Lovecraft.
Oh, God, no. It's the tentacles. The tentacles. You can never buy suits. That's the problem. You can never buy clothes, you know? It's a nightmare.
There's nothing quite as bad as being grabbed by the tentacles. Anyhow, moving on as swiftly as physically possible. As always, I am Adam. I am Groovy, your host for the Fluffenhammer. As the man you have just heard, of course, is George.
Hello, ladies and gents. How's it going? And baking in the harsh sun of what may well be Sheesh or something at this point. It's hideous. I hate it.
The yellow sun of Sheesh. It burns down upon us. But we are not alone this day. Oh, no. For I have created the rites. I have said the words. And the door has opened. And within that door stepped a figure of great magnitude, and it is my great pleasure to announce hello, Andrew Turnbull.
Hello.
How are you doing, fella?
I'm doing fine.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. Andrew here is a guy that I've worked with many times on many things, and is the owner of the world's greatest Alec Guinness impression. But only when he...
Alec Guinness by way of Peter Serafinowicz, to be fair.
Yeah. So we've done work before in the Transformers circles, reviewing comics, and within those comics was created the joy that is Alpha Trion and the Brown Crayon, which
okie dokie. Now that's a reference I certainly don't get.
Which I've noticed this week has got traction again on Twitter, and I don't understand how that's happened.
Oh, that's because Becca said she liked Alpha Trion in Exodus, and it's like, no, he's awful. Alpha Trion is just straight up awful. He has a magic pen that records history but doesn't tell anybody else anything useful. It's so much worse in the IDW comic. I'd have killed him if I'd been in that universe. He would have...
To a firm believer that there should have been a 4-part miniseries where Optimus Prime just beats him into the ground.
Correct.
Beating up old men. That's an excellent way of opening the podcast.
Well, you know, it's much like Thundercats, where a group of teenagers moves into the neighbourhood and terrorises the old man.
That's an excellent point, actually. I've always wondered that about the original cartoon. Like, Mumra wasn't really doing anything that terrible, was he, when they turned up? Insofar as I'm aware, he was sleeping.
Yeah. He naps. That's all Mumra does. He has a nap.
That's it.
Yeah.
talks to himself, slobbers a bit, and then goes back to sleep.
He sleeps and looked after his dog. That's all he did.
And his dog, yes, absolutely. And spies on people in his big scrying pool.
Yeah, he's just a filthy old pervert, but he's doing nobody any harm.
That's exactly it.
But anyhow, moving on swiftly. So,
Swiftly.
Mr. Turnbull, what we normally do is we ask people about their journey through Games Workshop, the experiences they've had, and to get their story in their own words. So, just kick this off, knowing full well where this is going to end up. Where does it begin for you? What was the point where Games Workshop became something that you were interested in?
Well, I kind of dabbled with, as we all did, Hero Quest and Space Crusade and Talisman.
Of course.
And then it was towards the end of high school, actually, as a friend of mine was into, had just gotten 40k, and then was talking about sort of setting up a club together. So, and I kind of had a wee look at the stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's cool. But it's actually Blood Bowl was kind of the thing that got me playing the games first, because that's the easiest one to pick up at the time.
Yeah.
So, club started, I had my Blood Bowl team, Chaos Dwarfs.
Oh, nice. Good man!
Oh,
good man!
And then went straight from sort of that, bought the 40k box set. The joys of having a part-time job and not really drinking at that age. So.
What edition would that be, Andy? Would that be second eds, third eds?
Third, so that's 95 I picked it up. So.
I think that would have been second ed. The one with the orcs and the space marines and the cardboard dreadnought.
Yes. Cardboard dreadnought.
Yeah, man. Simpler times.
So got that, and you kind of get the little snippets of history throughout the two books and the little sort of basic army thing. That's like, no, I like the sound of Dark Angels better than anybody else. And plus also differentiating us at that point, because Craig had Blood Angels, Jason, who's the other guy that set the club up, he had Space Wolves, so it's like, and Ultramarines just were dull.
Yeah, at that point, my God, they were just the vanilla Marines, weren't they? At that point,
absolutely. So you're like, no danger, and it's like, dark, and you kind of go, oh, they're number one as well, so must be the best.
Yes, fair point. I suppose at that time as well, it was kind of a good time to be getting into the Dark Angels, because of course the Angels of Death Codex was just around the corner at that point.
Oh, aye. Well, more on that later. That annoyed me. That was such a bad codex. It was the Blood Angels with the Dark Angels afterthought.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think there was more on the Dark Angels history in the Chaos Codex than there was in that.
Yeah. And also, they had the worst special rules for Terminators going.
Yeah, which is ironic, isn't it? Because, of course, the Deathwing are obviously... The Dark... One of the things that characterised the Dark Angels from the very beginning is they had the elite of the elite Terminators.
For Terminator. And what do you get? You're immune to psychology.
Oh, that sucks!
What's that?
That sucks! Back then,
But again, you got leadership 9, and generally you're, again, for your Terminator squad, they're not really going to be failing many psychology checks.
No.
So that was kind of a redundant special rule for the guys back then. It really was.
Yeah, and you kind of sat there going, what was the point?
Yeah.
Thankfully, at least the Raven Wing kind of made it worthwhile to get an army based on that codex, but it was brutal.
I mean, the only thing I like about that codex, is that it really established the monasticism of the Dark Angels, which I like a lot. I love all the robes and the knightly stuff. I kind of like the big floating cathedrals and all of that nonsense. I like that.
Yeah, none of this, you got a nice wee planet. It's like, nope, you've just got a big rock in space that goes about.
Got Gothic towers sprouting all over it. I love that.
But as cool as that is, it's the beginning of the end of the Dark Angels for me, because it takes away Cloud Runner's story. Anger, rage.
Well, there is a little bit of hand waving.
Yeah.
You can kind of let that go past. Hence why they recruit from other worlds. So but
it's been diminished, hasn't it? It's one of those stories that was core at one time, and which a lot of, I think, from sort of our generation, of 40k fans really we took it to our hearts because it was published in various different forms.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you had the comic of it at one time. I think there was a comic of it in one of the periodicals that they produce that was very, very good, which a lot of people remember because it was released free with White Dwarf at one point. And of course, the story itself gained some traction because it's interesting, it's bizarre, it's slightly weird, like all of the Native American influences that they introduced, which are just not part of the Dark Angels anymore. They have just totally disappeared now.
You see, it's one of those things, and I know why it happens, and I know why the normalization of the Dark Angels had to happen, and it all makes sense. But on the other hand, you don't take Lame Bear away from me. Lame Bear is awesome. That's his Weasel Fierce. Two Heads Talkin's even better because he's called Two Heads Talkin, and that's a great name.
That is a fantastic name.
I prefer Two Heads Talking was my favourite out of them. It's like, yeah.
Well, Two Heads Talkin stood up to a goddamn patriarch and blew it up with his own brain, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. I mean, that said, I like the way they've tried to characterize the Dark Angels more extremely in recent years. They've really tried, like all the other Space Marine chapters, they've tried to move them away from just being the Green Marines with the white Terminators and the black bikes. They've given them this whole knightly ethos, which I really, really like. And then on top of that, they've layered this mystery, this kind of monastic mystery where they're slightly sinister.
Yeah, because again, they kind of had to do that when they said, okay, right, here's our backstory, here's what's happened. Yeah, so if you're going to be Secret Order, they're going to be completely cutting themselves off as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Because the paranoia that's just, we must do this before it gets found out.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the fact that really what characterizes them is the fall, isn't it? That is the linchpin of their history, which I think was originally introduced in the Second Dead Chaos Codex, if I remember correctly, in the Fallen Angels section, which fleshed out everything, like the fall of Caliban, the Luther, the creation of the Rock from the remains of Caliban. And the fact that the Fallen are scattered throughout time and space and the warp, like throughout all of creation. And the fact that the Dark Angels will do anything, even if it's against the interests of the wider Imperium or against the laws of the wider Imperium, to take these guys down.
I think that's one of the interesting things about the Dark Angels is that they almost become self-policing at this point, and it's almost a... more so than any other chapter, that they very much have this. I'm trying to think what the word would be, but they spend so much time looking to their own interests that they are actually a heretical chapter.
More or less. I mean,
they're loyal to a point.
They're loyal ideologically.
Yeah.
You know, they're loyal to a very particular notion of the Emperor and of the Imperium, but it's a very particular notion of it. And one could argue that one of the tensions in the present-day Dark Angels is the fact that over the centuries, this drive to take out the Fallen, to reclaim what they consider to be their honor or whatever, has actually shifted them further away from that. It's actually made them more monomaniacal, more paranoid, more secretive, more monastic, to the point whereby, if everything they had done was released to the wider Imperium, they would be like excommunicate traitoris immediately.
Which is probably something...
I also just...
Sorry.
I was going to say, also like the idea that it's quite clear that more people know about it than the Dark Angels actually know.
Yes, I like that too. I mean, for one thing, the Crimson Slaughter, the Chaos Space Marines, the Crimson Slaughter, they know everything. They know everything because the Dark Angels are tied into their background. The Dark Angels are partially responsible for turning what were then the Crimson Sabers into the Crimson Slaughter. And it's because the Crimson Sabers were doing what was right. They were doing the right thing. They were fighting alongside the Dark Angels when the elements that eventually turned them to chaos were seeded. And it's because they came upon a Dark Angels interrogator chaplain who was torturing basically innocent Imperial citizens, and they told them to knock it off. You know? And since then, the Dark Angels have kind of waged this sort of subtle, legalistic war against the Crimson Sabres, and eventually ended up turning them to chaos. I mean, it's an interesting thing.
So what we're saying here is that the Dark Angels, they're not good guys.
No.
They're probably not bad guys. They're just selfish pricks.
They are. I mean, there are stories, particularly in the newer codices, of these guys abandoning their allies that they've been just so they can follow a lead on the Fallen, or to pursue a character who they think might be a fallen Dark Angel.
Yeah, so they're just completely, say, they've got their own mission, which, from their standpoint, is absolutely understandable, because they just would get wiped out.
Absolutely.
The minute.
I love them. I think they're one of the most interesting of the Imperial chapters because of these ambiguities.
You do kind of wonder whether they'll actually pull the trigger on that at some point. With a slight putting up with them now, actually, after decades of not moving forward from the year 40,000.
That would be awesome.
A lot happened in that year.
I sincerely... Yeah, it's been a big old year, hasn't it? Busy.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, so January, Tyranids happened.
Yep.
February, Tyranids and Gene Stealers. February, Armageddon was invaded. End of February,
March,
Armageddon was invaded
again.
That planet, it cannot catch a break, can it?
I know.
It just cannot catch a break. I mean, okay, it still exists, unlike Cadia, but my God.
What is
you just
Happy
cut
Christmas.
Your losses and just go, nah.
I like the idea of using the year 40,000 as being like 1 year where everything's happened in the 40k history. And it's Happy Christmas, Cadia went boom.
Yeah, bang. Yeah. You could use that as like the North Star, couldn't you, on top of the Christmas tree? Cadia exploding. Bang. That'd be fun.
Does that mean that Trazen is one of the three wise men?
He actually even looks like it, with the way he's sort of stumped over and he's got he's holding caskets and things. He actually even looks like he could be used in that regard. That is brilliant.
We three men of Cadian death, one shall burn you with his breath.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean, I actually, as much as I lament the loss of certain influences in the Dark Angels, I mean, it would have been really interesting if they'd run with the Native American thing. I mean, I wonder what they would have become if that's the influence they ran with, what kind of imagery they would have amassed. But I do like the fact that they've gone down this knightly order monastic thing. Mm-hmm. Particularly with the more recent miniatures, those box sets that have robes and things, and lanterns and candles all over them. And you've got the Deathwing they've expanded enormously recently. So you have the normal Deathwing, and you also have the Knights, the Deathwing Knights, who are fabulous miniatures and rock solid. Have you ever fought against them?
I haven't in the newest version yet.
Good God, they're tough. They are the elite of the elite Terminators. They're very hard to take down.
How?
As it should have been. Take no Andy Chambers and Jervis Johnson with your CAC Angels of Death Codex.
Oh my God. I mean, although there is one worse than that. Do you remember in, I think it was 4th ed, 40k, they released 2 codexes at once. There was the 4.0 Chaos Space Marine Codex, probably one of the most loathed and lamented codexes ever produced, and quite rightly. And there was also the Dark Angels Codex that went alongside it, and they were the only 2 that had that particular format. They realised very quickly that everybody hated it, and then the codex that came out after, I can't quite remember what it was totally different. It was a completely different format. So for a little while, the Dark Angels and the Chaos Space Marines, which some might argue are interchangeable, had the worst codices in the entire game.
No, I skipped that. So
Well,
thankfully,
yes. If you're ever put together a collection of codices, and I did this for Chaos, I've got basically all of the publications in 40k that has ever been produced. Miss that one. Skip it. It's just atrocious. It's one of the worst products Games Workshop have ever put out.
But going back to your point about if they'd kept the Native American sort of aspect, I think you probably would have had them tearing themselves apart anyway, based on if they were to do anything else with sort of that Native American imagery, it would kind of be seen now in our more enlightened times as quite on the side of cultural appropriation. So probably want to look at how do we put a positive spin on that, and it would be those would be turning against the Empire because it's like, nope, you have come across. Again, it's another easy analogy for white man has come along and enslaved us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that could have been fascinating, couldn't it? Because then they could have been the positive side of the renegades.
Yeah.
As opposed to marketing them all as though they're insane, they're lunatics, they're butchers, they're flawed somehow. These guys could have been the counterpoint to that. They could have been the ones that demonstrate that being part of the Imperium of Man isn't necessarily a positive thing.
Yeah.
Which it isn't.
Probably would have been wiped out all the quicker because they were the bigger threat than Chaos.
Well,
because it's easy to have...
Ideologically speaking, yeah, because you could even see, in that instance, you could see even some of the other loyalist chapters looking at them and going, yeah, they're kind of right.
So they would have been, again, wiped out probably very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fair point. That if you look at the miniatures now, there are tiny little references to that influence. Some of the Deathwing Terminators have like little feathers on their...
They still keep that, yeah, so...
It's just the tiniest little reference to that influence, but that's about it. That's all you're going to get. In fact, I don't think in the more recent codices, they have referenced those stories. But I think in the latest one, the 8th Ed Codex, which is very good, by the way. In fact, it's probably the best the Dark Angels have ever been, to be honest. They do not. I think it's gone. I think it's done away with now.
That sound you hear is me weeping into my beard. In my heart, Weasel Fierce went down with his fist inside a Gene Stealer's mouth, pulling its tongue out to beat him to death with it.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. One thing they have done with the more recent codex is that they've expanded the armies massively. Every single codex has sections where they look at the alternative versions of like the successor chapters in the Space Marine codexes. Yeah. There is absolutely no reason why you can't create a successor chapter of the Dark Angels that has that history attached to it.
What the hell would you call that chapter?
No, I don't know.
That doesn't come across as being slightly racist, you know.
This is the point. This is what I was thinking. It's like, how would you do it where it wouldn't look a little bit 1950s American TV, you know?
I mean, you could... the only thing I think of was find out what in Native American Dark Angel translates as and just call them that.
That's a good idea.
And just, no, they see themselves as Dark Angels, however, they're going to speak in their own tongue, their own language. Uh-huh. That's it. So rather than the Dark Angels co-opt them, they've just, in effect, co-opted the Dark Angels.
That's a cool idea, I like that.
Have your cake and eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be a really fun thing to model an army on that basis. Really fun, because you'd have to go to work. You wouldn't be able to just buy Dark Angels miniatures and use them because they're just stylistically not appropriate.
Yeah.
You know, they're much too European. Much too gothic in their appearance, you know, it just wouldn't work.
I have discovered, I just went onto Google, by the way, to try and find a English to Navajo or Cherokee, English to Cherokee translator. The first thing that comes up is English to English translator.
That's useful.
It's not entirely helpful, let's be honest. Right, so...
But this is something, this is something I really like about the new codices. And in fact, the Dark Angels one is fabulous. It has loads of successor chapters in it. They heartily encourage you to go away and make up your own background for your either your successor chapter or whatever small contingent of the Dark Angels you're using.
Yeah.
There's something I'm interested here, Andy. And it's moving away from the Dark Angels here. But you had a Chaos Dwarf Blood Bowl team.
Yes.
There's a reason that we're friends, and this is one of it. So that would be the mid-90s release of Blood Bowl, was it?
Yeah. The third, I think, edition of Blood Bowl at that point. The one that came with the one that had Death Zone released shortly after it.
Yeah, that's the first one was cardboard only. The second one had the Dungeon Bowl expansion.
Yeah. The third is the best.
Yeah.
I remember that edition very well because that's basically when I came into the hobby. The first White Dwarf I had was the one with the Minotaur on the cover that was from that edition of Blood Bowl.
On the Death Zone cover as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was the cover for that.
Yeah.
It was the most accessible with the best customizing in terms of the star players and the Death Zone expansion. It just worked, and it was easy to get a league set up, and it was quite fun.
I just remember the star player miniatures, particularly the ones that were Gretchen or goblins.
Yeah, Nobler Blackwort and Scrapper Sorehead.
Nobler Blackwort, yeah, and Scrapper Sorehead, yeah, friggin' hell, yeah, the one on the pogo stick.
Do you want to know something really fun? I've bought them.
Oh, brilliant. Is Nobler Blackwort the one with the chainsaw?
He is, yeah.
Yes, because Fungus the Loon's the one with the Morning Star. Also the ball and chain, I should say.
Fabulous.
I haven't found Fungus the Loon anywhere on eBay for a decent price, but when I do, I will be buying him again to go into my my Auric. Because, good God, I love those minis. They are just so characterful. I mean,
they are so characterful, and of course because they were individual miniatures, they could spend a lot of time on them. So they do stand up pretty well, and they're all pretty dynamic as well for metal miniatures. They're actually doing things. Like they're not just standing there.
Yeah, I mean the Scrapper Sorehead. There's weight in him holding onto the pogo stick.
Yeah.
Which isn't a sentence I thought I'd say today.
No, it's an unusual one. It's a very unusual one.
Yeah, Noble I'd say is probably not the better of the lot of them, just because he's kind of jaunty on hopping on one leg with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
But Fungus is great because he's just the ball's extended out wide. He's just in mid swing.
Yeah.
It's a great little figure.
I think it's the Jez Goodwin sculpt, if memory serves me right.
I think you're right.
Him and Gary Morley, I think, were the two main guys. I know Morley did a lot of the Chaos Dwarf, if memory serves me, so probably the two of them. Probably Jez, to be fair, though. He seemed to do most of the ones at that time.
I'm actually just having flashbacks now to purchasing that White Dwarf for the first time and reading it so much that the pages turned white and all the paint ran, and I think it fell apart eventually. I think the whole magazine just fell apart.
Oh, good days.
My God.
Such beautiful art as well. I remember for that release of Blood Bowl, all the art was just super poppy. A lot of Wayne England work, I think, went.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think he did a lot of the badge. He did all the badges as well.
He did.
Like the club crest, so they all looked. So it kind of had that unified feel, which separated, I think, from some of the other games. Kind of gave it a feel. Not the rest of them because they were all good, but that kind of going from John Blanche to Wayne England and like the 40k sort of manuals and stuff, it is a bit of a jump.
Massively,
absolutely.
You kind of have that.
But it's something I'm experiencing at the moment because they're doing the Ages of Chaos adjunct show to this. I've gone right back to the beginning to like the ROC books, the Realms of Chaos books from the late 1980s, and the artwork. If you look at those two books and compare them to, say, the second Ed Chaos Codex that came out a few years later, the jump in the style of the artwork is insane because back then they didn't have a house style.
No.
Really.
Yeah.
They hadn't established it at that point. They were largely just getting in people they knew and just people they liked, like 2000 AD artists and whatnot. And it's really fascinating. You get this wonderful mixture of styles whereby everything looks strange. Everything is weird and doesn't quite fit with one another, but I kind of like that.
It's the same with the Roll Trader book, because a friend of mine had that, and it'd fallen apart, so it had a big massive ring binder. But some of the art in that was not quite ready for prime time, shall we say.
Yes.
But it did give it a good feel, though. So it's like so you could see where Games Workshop was at the time. It's like, yeah, that's still a mom and pop style operation.
Absolutely.
Here. We're not quite the all encompassing litigious juggernaut of despair that we are now.
They were up until about 4 years ago.
Up until about 4 years ago, yeah. I mean, they've done so much to turn it around.
Yeah.
But as we've we've discussed quite a lot on this show, and as I've said before, ladies and gents, I don't want people to feel as though we're being sycophantic or anything like that. But it is just genuine enthusiasm. It's the genuine enthusiasm of someone who went away from the hobby for a long, long time. And has just been drawn back by the Vault face, by how powerfully it's been turned around.
Without a doubt.
Well, yeah, it was always just that, again, for me, the part of what helped drive you away from it was the constant relaunching.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I don't mind you revamping your box sets and stuff, but stop mucking about with the rules.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point, and it was exactly what you were talking about earlier, Andy, where they were basically forcing you to change your army, not for any particularly good reason, but just because they wanted to sell you more.
And I don't mind them sort of expanding in terms of here's new stuff, so you can have the shiny new. It's the fact that would then suddenly, oh wait, you don't actually get that type of vehicle anymore.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like with the light speeders, it's like, get to. I've got a Raven Wing army, for God's sake. Of course I'm having that classic white metal land speeder with the heavy bolters and the assault cannon, because it's the best one of the land speeders. Oh wait, we don't have that one anymore.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
Here's a little shoe instead that flies. That was a god awful design. It just looked it looked like a metal moccasin that two chaps had sat.
Yeah. You kind of want a little pole to go through the middle for it to attach to a carousel, don't you?
Yeah.
Whereas
God.
the one before it was just, again, that looks like a land speeder.
Yeah.
And also has decent weapons on it.
Although trying to put it together, the old lead one or the white metal one, good God.
Oh, it was fun.
Many people lost a finger to that thing.
Yes,
but
many times.
How could you not like having your commander on a light speeder with a las? What was the 4+ save? I can't remember which one it was.
Guns.
No, the power shield, the one that gave you the 4+ save.
Oh, I know what you mean.
I can't mind what it's called now, but you had to see, oh look, you've got a land speeder that's pretty much almost virtually indestructible.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, if you want to be a complete douche, hide him behind heavy cover, pop up, use his high skills to get your accuracy on.
That's evil.
One used to play at the end. We got down because a friend of mine went to quite a few tournaments, so we ended up just going round at that point their 1,500 point army. So we played a lot of games like that. Plus they were relatively quick, so if you're at a club night, you could maybe get 2 games a night. So that was quite good. But I played against my friend one time, and it was just he was Space Marines, I was Dark Angel, so it's Marines against Marines, and I went for a mostly Raven Wing army. And then just, how you got the points for your corner of the board. I did so much damage to so many of his troops. However, he had one tech marine, just a tech marine, in a corner, who took out, and bear in mind, this was land speeders moving at pace. He took out, in 2 consecutive turns, a land speeder, the land speeder with my Raven Wing commander on it, and got the bonus point for complete the game, but he had to roll 6s, then 6s to hit.
Wow.
6s and 6s to wound, to get the maximum damage and everything. And of course, I failed my throw, the save throw. Boom. Because it took the 3 points off the guy, but I've never seen one person roll as many 6s in my life.
Yeah, I love that.
And consecutive, it was like, and because he had that, and he had a rhino that hadn't completely destroyed in one other corner of the table, he beat me by a point. Pure raging.
I also remember many, many years ago when my Tyranid army came up against a Imperial Guard, and the first round of shooting took out my Hive Tyrant, which meant for the next 3 turns, my Tyranids were just running around the table.
I was just running in circles,
Pretty much,
chasing their own tails.
Pretty much.
Yeah?
It was one of the most disheartening yet hilarious games I'd ever played.
What edition was that, Adam?
3rd, I think it would be.
That was 3rd ed. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because the psychology rules were a bit more. They were a bit more dramatic.
There was a lot more synapse stuff in the 3rd ed Tyranids, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, if you took out the synapse creatures in 3rd ed, then the army fell to bits.
Mm-hmm. Totally and utterly.
Yeah,
because that was the first time they made a Tyranid army that was anything other than Tyranid warriors.
Yes,
and Gene Stealers.
Gene Stealers, yeah, pretty much.
And Squigs.
Pretty much, yes. It reminds me of, like, there was a game I had, I think it was in 4th ed. Yes, I believe it was in 4th ed, and I was playing Death Guard versus Dark Angels, and my opponent, he had this attack bike, and I threw everything in my army at it. There was a point where it had survived like 3 or 4 turns close combat with 4 different units. There were Plague Bearers against it. There was a Dreadnought fighting it. There was a Chaos Sorcerer fighting it. There was a Great Unclean One fighting it at one point, and it just would not die. I kept fumbling my rolls with every single damn unit, or it just kept making saves. I think it survived until the end of the battle. I mean,
it's always the one thing that's weird is, like, so many Space Marine armies, whoever has them, don't go into bikes enough.
Yeah.
True.
And there's the Space Marines on bikes are devastating.
Yeah, they're really good. I mean, especially in the current edition, bikes are insane chaos. Oh man, the bikers in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, if you using some of the combinations of marks of chaos and stratagems, are mental.
It was the same with even on the Angel of Death. Much then, like, the Codex wasn't great. The Raven Wing were fantastic. So you just Raven Winged your army as much as possible.
I mean, they've always been good. Now they're insane. I mean, now you can literally take an entire army, and you've got various different units you can take with them, and they're a big, like, they're sort of like land speeders, but they're massive. They're really huge, and they've got floating bits of Caliban on the back of them and nonsense like that. They're brilliant, absolutely wonderful army.
Because I always love the fact you just get a pack of scouts, get a 5-man Devastator squad, sit in the back and make sure you've got a last cannon and a couple of heavy bolters, and then get a Ravenwing army.
Yep.
And if you going up against almost particularly anyone who is Imperial Guard or Orcs or even Tyranids, you can do so much damage in the first couple of turns that you'll probably, even if you're outnumbered, you'll probably survive the battle.
You'll cripple them from the beginning. Yeah.
And if you want a Deathwing, just teleport them in.
Just teleport. Yeah, that's what they're all about. What they're all about. Just teleport right in and kick backside, basically, which they can do now.
Yeah, because that was the only thing that I ever did with them on the 3rd edition when I had them. It's like, nope, just teleport in. We'll just hold them off the board, teleport in behind enemy lines. And plus, if you've got your scouts there, you've got that your locator beacon. Nice.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I
was a dick. Playing Dark Angels. I was a complete dick.
I mean, have you read the more recent fluff on the Dark Angels, Andy?
I'm a bit behind in terms of a lot of that, just with various things.
So you don't know what's happened to the prisoner at the heart of the rock, then?
Luther's. Has he escaped?
He has. He's gone. Yeah. I mean, we had it revealed that the prisoner is Luther and not Lionel Johnson, which was one of the theories. He escaped. He didn't really escape. He was set free
by the Watchers in the Dark.
Yeah. Well, by shadowy forces. We're not quite sure who. It could have been Zeechan forces who were invading the rock at the time, because the Changeling, the Demon of Zeech, had. He disguised himself as one of the higher up Dark Angels and was basically manipulating them. So he may have let Luther out. Or it may have been the Watchers in the Dark. We're not quite sure. And we don't know where he is. Nobody knows where he is or what's happened to him.
I'm still putting the theory down that the Watchers in the Dark are just trained snotlings.
That would be ace. I would love that, because they're one of the big mysteries, aren't they?
Yes.
One of the big mysteries, because nobody knows what they are.
Apart from Tiny.
Or where they come from. Or what they're up to. But they do have like a supernatural element to them. That's definitely the case. They are sort of pseudo-demonic.
Yeah.
And again, that's the kind of thing that even if, well, like when Lionel comes back, because he'll come back.
Oh God!
If they brought Gelman back, they'll bring him back.
Yep, definitely.
They'll just wait a couple of years. It's like you've got little aliens running about.
Yeah. I also, even if they're not aliens, what if they're sort of subhumans or abhumans? Even that wasn't tolerated. So yeah, I can't see him being that pleased with what his chapter's become.
Unless wherever he is, or whatever he's doing at the moment, involves the Watchers in the Dark, and he comes back in a slightly corrupted form.
You think he's going to be a Watcher in the Dark?
I'm just thinking
that's more than slightly corrupted, Adam. To be fair, you're stretching the meaning of the word slightly. We're so much.
Although to have a teeny tiny Lionel Johnson running around the battlefield would be the best thing ever.
I was more thinking of like a loyalist demon Primarch, but no, I quite like the idea of Lionel Johnson coming back and he's just 3 foot tall.
But I think at that point everyone just goes, you know what? So that's what you get for being loyal to the Emperor.
Yeah,
Sod that. I want giant wings and fire breathing. Come on.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got that compared to Magnus and Mortarion in all of their dark majesty. It's like, come on, who wouldn't turn to chaos at that point? But no, Adam, I think that's a brilliant idea. If he does come back and maybe he's like hooded so you can't see his face, and he's immense, he's huge.
Yeah.
And he's maybe got wings or something.
Yeah, I think that would actually work really well.
That would be really cool. I'd love to see that. You know what would be really cool if he's a Fallen? If he comes back with an army of Fallen rather than with the Loyalists.
That, I think, would work really well, because that
ace?
throws the entirety of what the Dark Angels have been doing into a complete array.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you've got, obviously, Cypher's got his sword still.
He certainly does. He certainly does.
He's, again, I know when they relaunched the editions, he's now in that new pack, but before that, he was on a constant path, albeit circuitous. He was heading towards Earth.
He was, and he almost got there this time. Yeah. I mean, he helped Guilliman get there when he was resurrected, and unfortunately Guilliman reneged on his promise to Cypher and imprisoned him rather than letting him see the Emperor, which is what he wanted. And Cypher, obviously, what do you not do with Cypher? You don't imprison him. He'll just disappear. And that's exactly what happened. He just disappeared from his cell. So not only is Cypher still out there with the Fallen Angels, doing whatever the hell it is he's doing, Guilliman at least has some idea of what's going on with the Dark Angels because he's met the Fallen Angels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he must have at least suspicions of what's going on with them.
And just you're looking at, but why has he kept the sword is the big thing. So what, and why go to Earth?
Yeah, and what is the power that helps him? What is the power that spirits him away and that helps him to escape whenever he's captured? It is not, I don't think, one of the Chaos powers or anything like that. It's far too subtle.
I always thought it was the Emperor. Me, it was always because you purposely keep him out of harm's way. If Chaos wouldn't really necessarily be as devoted because the Chaos demons are quite fickle and have been shown to be like that. So.
Absolutely.
And they've got Abaddon and the Chaos Primarchs anyway. So what's one more servant?
Yeah,
absolutely.
So the Emperor wanted on Earth with the sword for some reason.
Yeah, I like that. And also there's the mystery of actually who Cypher is.
Yeah.
Which there are suggestions in the HH books about the Dark Angels, because what we find in those books is that the Lord Cypher isn't a name, it's a title.
Yeah, he's like a confessor, like the consigliere, really. He was Robert Duvall to Lionel Johnson's Al Pacino.
Yeah. Absolutely. So who is this one? Who is this guy? Is he a character we know? Is he a character that we know from the books? We just don't know. He is the eternal mystery. Although it would be nice if they answered a few things about him now. Just a few little things.
Just enough to get people's minds going in terms of what does it actually mean.
Exactly, yeah.
Because Because again, Cypher, blank slate. I get
exactly.
that. It's a pun, but still.
And also a signifier for change.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what is it? What is it he's going to do? Is he going to drive that sword into the Emperor's breast, or is he going to offer it to him to sort of, as a means of repentance for the fallen angels, maybe? Who knows?
My old hammer brain is now working in overtime. How interesting would it be if it's not the sword that's the important part?
Oh, okay.
So, if you think about... And it's still there now, but it's not really as pushed to the fore as it used to be. The multifaceted essence of the Emperor, how he is 1,000 different voices all screaming at once. If Cypher is maybe a collection of 2 or 3 of those parts, and the entire point is to get Cypher to the Emperor, so either the Emperor can release himself from the Golden Throne and get a physical body again, or take those parts back, as they talked about in the Inquisitor books, the Jacques Draco books.
Oh, interesting. So you think Cypher might be like, he's either a manifestation of some of the facets of the Emperor, or he's carrying them somehow.
Yeah, like this kind of...
It's in the sword.
Yeah.
The sword. I've always thought the sword was some kind of part of the Emperor, or it was to help kind of either free him or give him enough power to sustain him, because he is still, again, as we know, dying slowly.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I wonder if they'll ever answer it, because it seems to me the trajectory they're on is that eventually they will do something with the Emperor. They'll either kill him, maybe they'll go really old hammer with it. Maybe they'll go back to the ROC days, because in the ROC books it tells you what he wants to do. It tells you that he wants to die. And that the Golden Throne is not keeping him alive; it's actually holding him in his physical form, for the benefit of the structure of the Imperium. So he's being held in place, and when he does eventually die, he'll explode through the warp as like a balancing factor to the Chaos Powers. He will be the god of order,
the Star
Child, as such. Yeah, the Star Child, exactly. So maybe they're going that route with it. Maybe they'll go that route with it, or maybe they'll have him get up. Maybe they'll do like an Age of the Emperor style thing where he'll actually get up in a new form, in a new body or something.
It's a weird one because the Emperor is so built into the essence of 40k. I can see why people would like.
Excuse me. Something it's here to do. No, but I'll get him for you.
Obviously, we'll cut this bit out.
Yeah, we'll pick up. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries. There's always something. It's usually either your dog or my cat, isn't it? That interrupts.
True enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we were saying, sort of the Emperor there being sort of built in. What happened?
He's so part of the essence of 40k. He's so built into the lore that I can see why there'd be a giant fear to do anything with him. Because once you do that, you have shaken up the entire status quo of the fiction in a way that is you can't come back from. So
that's true.
Whether he gets up, whether he dies, everything changes, and you lose massive part of what makes 40k 40k. So the question is, what is the way forward? Do you bring him back to life in a physical form? Do you let him die as and become the Star Child? Where do you go with it?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, they can let... In the narrative of the universe, that's not an issue, because the Imperium would keep up the pretense whatever happened.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case.
So you kind of have that. So your dynamic shifts more towards the Imperium being, it's always they are bad guys, despite what the edgelords say.
Oh, absolutely, I mean, this is the fun of the 40k universe, isn't it? Ultimately, the protagonists, the heroic characters, are big Ubermensch space Nazis, you know.
But you would probably kind of have the Empire. You just have the Empire split up. It's just you do a civil war, at the end of a civil war, that you just have whatever the landscape changes.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because that is exactly what they were talking about in the run up to Eighth Ed. There has been this consistent rumor since Eighth Ed, and since the Cicatrix Maledictum splits the 40k universe in half, so you've got the Imperium Primaris and Imperium Secundus on either side. The theory is that they're building towards the Imperial Civil War with the returns of the Primarchs. So you've got Roboot already establishing his own sort of empire on this side, in Imperium Primaris, and you've already got built-in tensions going on there. On the other side, you have other Space Marine chapters and worlds that are out of contact with the Imperium, and which are developing along their own lines. So yeah, I think eventually what we're going to have is the Civil War. And I think it will be sparked by the coming back of some of the other Primarchs, most notably Lehman Russ and Lionel Johnson.
Well, yeah, the moment Lehman Russ turns back up, that's when everything's going to have to go sideways. Because, one, he's going to turn back up on the side of the Great Rift that's not currently being policed by Roboot.
Uh-huh.
And then, two, he's going to come back and go, what do you mean Roboot's back?
Yeah. And what's he doing as well? I mean, I think that's going to set up some tensions. The fact that Roboot has set himself up as the regent, or basically the emperor in all but name. He is the emperor at this point, isn't he? He is the Lord High Commander of the Imperium. He's the emperor.
Yeah.
That will not sit well with Lehman at all.
Well, he's going to go absolutely off his rocker. And from the looks of things, when he comes back, he's not exactly going to be... what's the word I'm looking for here? Happy.
Well, you've also got the built-in tensions with Lehman himself. I mean, in his chapter, I mean, the Space Wolves have already pretty much been declared traitorous at this point. They were fired upon by the Imperium, by the Dark Angels, and by the Grey Knights and the Inquisition in the Wrath of Magnus campaign, because it's been revealed that they have these mutants in their midst. They have the Wolfen in their midst, which, you know, were it not for the fact that Magnus caused such trouble, that would have caused a war in the Imperium. They'd have come down on them with everything they've got. Yeah,
because it breaks the first tenet of the Imperium. Thou shalt not harbour the mutant. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, come on. There have been chapters that have been declared excommunicate traitors for far less than that.
Yeah.
Yep. And again, you'll see. I'm not sure what the current state of play is with Blood Angels, but if Gaelman's going to go with, again, sort of Uber Empire, they'll be on the wrong side because of Death Company.
Yup. Yeah, their curse, which they've been keeping secret for a very long time.
So it's going to be you'll have some very clear lines in terms of Dark Angels that will come out what they are.
Yep.
And because they're on Caliban anyway, they're not stuck to either side of the rift. So there's no sort of geographical loyalty of being stuck there. They'll go where they need to go.
Exactly. Now that could be a very interesting place for them to be, couldn't it? On the interim between the two, that could be a very interesting place for them to inhabit.
I can see that happening.
It's probably where they'll keep. Yeah, because it'll kind of put them in as if they could tip the balance either way, and you've got the.
It is consistent as well. It's consistent with their background, because if the books, the Horus Heresy books that deal with them, it points out how they're one of the last chapters to declare their open loyalties, because they are actually considering all the way through whether to side with Horus or whether to side with the Emperor.
Yeah, and also the fact that, again, you've got, just from the Primarch standpoint, if Lionel comes back, he's not going to trust Gaelman because they're cut from the same cloth. But you've got the thing with Russell, though they're friends, there'll be that tension there.
Oh, that tension's going to be huge, especially since the Dark Angels have already fired upon Fenris at this point. There's already been the opening shots of hostility. So, if it were not for the destruction of Cadia and all that nonsense, there would have been an open war that probably would have torn the Imperium in two at that point. So, yeah, I mean, they are building towards it. In fact, I would not be surprised to see that being a campaign maybe next year.
They have made a load of noise about there being a very big campaign next year that's going to shake a lot of things up, so that would make a lot of sense.
And the Space Wolves are involved in it. I mean, the three factions, all the factions will obviously be involved, but the three we know are definitely involved are the Space Wolves, and that's going to be Lehman coming back, I imagine. Yeah. I imagine he'll be the next loyalist Primarch. The Sisters of Battle, so the Ecclesiarchy, are going to have a big part to play in it, and the Black Legion. So Abaddon's going to have a bit of a resurgence, and I imagine they'll use it as an excuse to redo the entire Chaos range, because heaven knows it needs doing.
Good God, Tiny. Hang on. You know what you could do with that?
What's
you
that?
You could make Abaddon into the Watcher in the dark, because that mini is so tiny.
It wouldn't take much, just give him a hood, and he'll be fine.
To move things on into a different area, into a different arena, so to speak. One of the reasons I was excited about getting you on, Andy, is because there's a certain conversation which I feel that you're going to thrive in. And that conversation is about the ever-changing art of Games Workshop. And we touched upon it earlier on as well, but I wanted to get more in depth with it. Because I get the feeling that guys like Wayne England, Ian Miller, these are guys that you probably have quite a lot of affection for.
Yep. Well, I would say that the one that initially took to was Adrian Smith.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Not to be confused with the Iron Maiden guitarist. I think he did the one of Horus with the lightning claws and the Emperor.
Yeah,
that was one of the first one that kind of stuck in my head. Yeah. I think Wayne England's probably the best with orcs.
Yep.
I just think he gets it's cartoony, but not too cartoony and not too grotesque, which I think is the problem with orcs. People go wrong way. John Blanche is someone who I didn't quite like to start with, but kind of developed a taste for. He's not one that you kind of go into and go, yeah, that's cool.
No.
There's usually something that's interesting in the work.
Yeah.
But it's not always aesthetically pleasing. Mm-hmm. But there's an interest there. But as tastes become more sophisticated, and you read comics other than Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, I love Liefeld. I'll hear nothing against him. For what he does, he's fantastic.
Unfortunately, what he does isn't very good. Anyhow, carry on. Yeah.
I think you'll find it is. We'll have words about that in person. But I don't mind sort of the varying styles. I know it's something that puts a lot of people off. But again, my roots in comics are like Transformers was the thing that got me. So you wouldn't necessarily have the same artist 2 weeks in a row.
Of course, yeah.
So I became, as a child, trained to, so long as it looks recognisably like the character, I'm fine with it. And I like a different interpretation. I do think, though, there are certain people that kind of skew better to certain things.
Definitely.
I see John Blanche is just anything to do with chaos. Yeah, just let him go.
And also the Imperium. I think that John Blanche does the best Imperial stuff, like the citizenry and the scribes and whatnot. The way he captures like that really hideous like loss of humanity that you get.
Any cyborgs or like the servitors and things like that.
Love it.
And any sort of cathedral type illustration, just give it to John.
There is some of John Blanche's artwork in a very old book now, the Liber Chaotica, which was a publication from Black Library, which dealt with, it's like the best background book on the Chaos powers you could ever find. And the Liber Chaotica Slanesh has a lot of John Blanche's artwork in it, and I tell you, he goes for it with Slanesh in a way that a lot of the other artists don't, because obviously there are certain elements of Slanesh that are difficult to capture. He just goes for it, and they are sublime, his Slaneshi creatures. They're just beautiful.
It all struck me that John Blanche would be a great production designer for a Hellraiser film.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
It's like, excuse me, Gary Tunnicliffe, go away. Your time is done.
Oh, good God, yes. Please, Jesus.
But it's like, give it to John Blanche, say, go and create some new Cenobites.
Yeah.
And I think you would get something really interesting out of that.
I think you get something very special indeed out of that. That could potentially. I'd love to see him do like a series of, I don't know, like Hellraiser illustrated stories or comics or something like that. If you could get something very special out of that.
A Clive Barker written John Blanche illustrated comic. That would be. Do you need some alone time, George?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. That would be one of those, those weird confluences that sometimes happen in art where everything is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can just see the two of them would do something good. But yeah, and let's say Blanche is one that I kind of grew to like.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say Wayne England was the first I really like, again, because it came into Blood Bowl, so he was doing a lot of the illustrations for that. So, and I just thought, again, he did have a good take on the orc.
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of the orc face. So, I think not so much on his space marine stuff. It was never he was never quite the go-to guy for that.
No, he's more. He does the more organic stuff really well, really well. So his Nurgle artwork, for example, of Nurgle demons and whatnot, is spectacular. In fact, there is that Wayne England piece that's in the second Ed Chaos Codex of the Great Unclean One. Mm-hmm. It's a whole page spread, and that artwork is still the basis they go to when they create the Great Unclean One miniatures.
Yeah,
because it is just the epitome of Great Unclean One.
The thing that always got me with Wayne's work is that everything looked like it was just about to start moving before your eyes. The sense of motion and weight that man carried in everything he did.
Well, again, as going back to the concept, I'm a big fan of dynamism and storytelling, and particularly in comics. So it's like his why, and I'll mention him again for probably the only other time he'll get name checked in this podcast, is Rob Liefeld. Because whatever you see about anatomy, is his work has a sense of energy to it that you could go and I'll just to pick some like John Cassidy, for example, gorgeous line work, but there's not always the sense of energy to it. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, if I'm buying a comic, I want, as I've said before, there's a through line in comics: Jack Kirby, Walt Simonson, Jess Senior, Rob Liefeld. That's an axis to follow in terms of people that just, it's all about energy. Dynamic storytelling. Whatever other flaws or your foibles they might have, they have those bases down pat. Mm-hmm. But I don't see many people holding a candle to them. So yeah, Rob Liefeld.
I can see the point you're coming from. It hurts me, but I can see it. It causes me great pain, right down in the corrupted black soul that I call a heart. But there's a flicker of pain there.
I'm right.
But it is fascinating, isn't it? As time has gone on, they've developed much more. Games Workshop, in particular, have developed much more of a kind of house style where the artwork is really beautiful. I mean, some of the more recent. Adam and I were discussing before we came on air the recent Age of Sigmar book, and the artwork is absolutely stunning. It is really beautiful. It has a very painterly, almost Renaissance quality about it. But one of the problems is that the style of art is largely the same now from book to book. Certainly in the codexes and the battle tomes, they have a very definite style that they want to capture in those books. And it is consistent throughout. Whereas if you look at the older books, very often there is this wonderful variation. So you can see, you can notice the consistent elements. You'll see an Adrian Smith bit of work, and you're like, oh yeah. And you'll see something by John Blanche, and you'll be able to realise what it is. That's not necessarily the case anymore.
That's kind of a shame, because there's nothing worse than house style and anything to me, because it's bland, it's uniform, whatever the merits of individual pieces are. After a while, you just like, it becomes background, which is what you don't want. So it's always the thing. Oh, it needs to be uniform for X, Y, and Z. It's like, it's ultimately counterproductive. Yeah. It becomes a point that people will not see the impact of the illustration, the painting, whatever it is, because it looks similar enough to the 50 or so that they've already seen.
Yeah, exactly. It all sort of blends together, doesn't it? It becomes almost like a collage. It's one of the things I noticed when reading the Realms of Chaos books recently, because of course they were some of the first books of their kind. They were the first army books for Games Workshop, full stop. So again, there is this wonderful naivety about them, where the artwork is all over the place. The composition is bizarre on the pages. It's really strange. It doesn't necessarily make a great deal of sense, but at the same time, there is this incredible enthusiasm about it, which bleeds off of the page. But also, I found that what they're depicting is way more various than, say, more recent publications. In more recent publications, the artwork largely depicts battles. That's
Yes.
primarily it. It is some kind of conflict that they're depicting, almost universally. In the old books, that is not the case. You have these domestic scenes where characters are doing really odd, weird things, where you're seeing them in different settings. You're seeing them in domestic settings, or in where they're not on the battlefield, where they're not firing their bolters, where they're not clashing chainswords. I kind of like that. I really like that. It gives them more depth. It gives them more in the way of narrative resonance, which I absolutely adore.
Yeah, just to say, it's like, again, ties into, it's just another battle scene. It might be the best one that's ever drawn, but you've lost something because it's in amongst 40 or 50 other illustrations of battle.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Show me the Emperor's morning routine or something.
The one that always gets me, and it goes back to Blanche again. There is one, and it's just of the custodies standing in front of the
Golden Throne.
And
Yes.
Yeah, another one.
You can sit and look at that thing for hours, and there's just so much going on, ranging from the little cyber cherubs just floating around carrying banners for some reason, and the cyber skulls and the servitors just all over the background, and then just the ornate design of the armor for the custodies when you it is an incredible
those wonderful
bit of work.
Like they're sort of Titan-esque, but they're not Titans as we know them.
Yeah.
Those immense machines that are to either side of the throne.
Yes.
Those are stunning. They do look like they're from a bygone age that the Imperium can't even remember now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a stunning bit of artwork, that is. Absolutely stunning bit of artwork.
So I'm aware that we're on a bit of a time limit this morning, which is entirely my fault, ladies and gentlemen. Entirely my fault. Charities, I love doing stuff with them, but organisation. Anyhow, so with that, we're going to have to start drawing things to a close, unfortunately.
Okie dokie.
Which is a shame, because I think I could quite happily talk about artwork in 40k 4 hours, which, if Mr. Turnbull would like to come back on, is something I would like to discuss with you for a sanctioned episode.
Yep, more than happy to do that at some point.
That would be superb, actually. A discussion about, just generally about the artwork. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think that would be quite a good one to do. So, with all that being said, Mr. Turnbull, as the guest for this episode, is there anything that you would like to pimp out into the ether?
Oh, of course. I'm, as you both know, heavily involved in the running of TF Nation. Yep. The exclusives are out just now, so if you're of our age or thereabouts, I'll draw your attention to the Transformers Generation 2 themed Ladybird book. That's right, we're doing a Ladybird style book in homage to those great books that we grew up with. Arts by a whole host of talented people from the Transformers community. And we've also got the original illustrator of the first 4 books, Mike Collins, has done the cover art.
That's
brilliant.
Chris Carter is colouring it. It will be a nice little hardback in the style of Ladybird. So
brilliant stuff.
And of course, we do have a certain Stan Bush singing at the event on the Sunday, the Saturday night.
Can't wait.
If you haven't already booked, get your tickets now. and please buy a copy of Ladybird. It's because it's kid friendly, which, much as I love the current Transformers comics that are out there just now, I wouldn't be quite happy putting any of them down in front of a 7-year-old saying "knock yourself out."
No, I'm with you on that one. Yeah, very.
They certainly deal with issues now, don't they? Which I really like. I
absolutely love them, but it's just alongside them. I've always thought it should be something a bit more accessible.
Yeah.
So this is absolutely accessible. You can give it to. It's not an ironic hipster modern Ladybird book nonsense. It's faithful to the storytelling.
Brilliant.
I'm sure Matt and Ralph, who wrote it under my tyrannical rule, will be more than happy to talk about the analysis that went into how a Ladybird book goes together in terms of text. Easy for me to just say, I want a story, G2, here's your characters, he needs to be the prominent one, this needs to be kind of the gimmick behind it. Write me a story.
Brilliant.
That's how I put these things together. Go.
That's the brief.
And I will assemble my team of artists. I've managed to do a little bit. And just as we think is the end papers, I actually dusted out some watercolours to paint them.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
You'll see how successful they were later. But it was nice to actually try and do something a bit old school.
That's awesome. I look forward to grabbing that.
Me too. That'll be fabulous.
And of course, if you are at TF Nation, me and George will also be there, and
we certainly will.
We're planning. Well, George doesn't know what I'm planning.
No, I don't, which is actually really distressing. Now that I think
I'm going to keep it quiet until we get there, because I think it's one of those things that I think will be a load of fun on the probably on the Friday night.
Okie
in the bar.
Cool. That sounds I like that combination of terms. Friday night in the bar. That accords with my plans for that evening. So brilliance.
Millman is also going to be involved.
Okay. Okie dokie.
Is there anything else you'd like to pimp out, Andy?
I'm on Twitter, Andrew D. Turnbull. That's pretty much where you'll find me most times if you want to see what I'm doing, which hasn't been a lot at the moment due to various health issues, but I seem to be, touch wood, hopefully starting to be on the mend, which is nice. Just in time to kill myself at TF Nation with my heavy workload.
Yay!
Sleep. Woo! Go scheduling.
It's alright, Andy, because there's going to be somebody there that you can just start throwing work at, you know.
Oh yeah, good. You will regret that on Friday night and Saturday night.
Yeah.
And on Sunday night you'll be too tired to talk, so you won't regret it. You'll just be sleeping.
Yay! Oh, George, your turn. Where do you want to pimp?
Oh my god. You can find me at strangeplaygrounds.com, where you can find all of my fiction and various articles and reviews and whatnot. You can also find me on the gingernutsofhorror.com, where you'll find articles and series of essays and whatnot, including recently a very angry counter article to something that was in the Sun newspaper.
Oh no.
Yeah, afraid so. You can also find me at Exaggerated Elegy on YouTube, where you'll find Let's Plays and my own podcast, The Strange Playgrounds, and you can also find me at Enigmatic Elegy on Twitter.
Excellent stuff. As for myself, I'm actually much reduced at the moment. It's weird. So you can find, obviously, the Fluffenhammer and all the Fluffenhammer things at thefluffenhammer.co.uk. We are on YouTube, we are on Twitter, we are on Tumblr. If you fancy getting involved, starting next week, I'm going to be bringing back an old favourite from my days of the old oil house. I'm going to start bringing back the Twitter Challenge. So, what you'll find is some kind of weird hypothetical situation will be placed upon Twitter. If you answer it, you will get read out on the show. Find us on Twitter, get involved. The Twitter Challenge is going to be good fun. Outside of that, you can find my audiobook production company at rivetedsounds.co.uk. Things are a bit slow there at the moment. There are things on the pipeline. It's the problem with these things, they take forever to get sorted. But the complete Solomon Kane continues to come out every week. We're halfway through now. The first story has been completely finished. We're now into the middle part with the short stories, and then there's a gigantic 12-part that's going to be coming out after that. You can find me on Twitter at Grufflock. You can find the Fluffenhammer at the Fluffenhammer, and that's about it at the moment. I am enjoying my far too busy life to start adding more stuff to it. One of the things I'm actually thinking about doing is I'm going to start releasing chapters from Tooth Harry in the next couple of months as well, to see how people react to it. So we'll see how that goes as well. With all that being said then, shall we get out of here? Thank you very much to Mr. Turnbull for taking part today.
Thanks very much for having me.
And thank you as always, George.
Always a pleasure, man. Always fun.
And most importantly, thank you, the listeners. We're going to go out again today with The Horse of Khan and 1939, because it's such a damn good song. I want to play it a second time. See you all later. Take care, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.